Thank you all for joining us. You can tell Blair is already warmed up, ready to go. He's in his very Hawaiian-esque like summer shirt happening here. You're like the most tropical Canadian I know, Blair. I don't know what this tropical look you have going on here, but not
I
quite
could
living
change.
up.
It's too warm in here.
Yeah. You gotta go for, whatever our stereotypes are. We're expecting that from you. Hey, I'll kick things off. We'll kind of just get warmed up here a little bit. There are a couple of announcements I want to make as we get started here. The reason why Blair is helping me today with this kickoff is that he wrote a new book called The Four Conversations. It's an amazing book. I literally have it dog-eared and so on. Um, but but as an addition to that, we at RevThink have small book groups, accountability groups, and so on. And my small group starting next week is going to use Blair's book for the next 10 weeks as our kind of outline. So I reached out to Blair and just asked, would you be willing to share with us today, give us some insights to help us kick things off? Um, but as part of that conversation, I would like you all to know the details around the small group. So let's see. We do have five small groups happening starting next week again. These small groups are open to anyone. We do ask for a minimal fee, but we just kind of throw that out there as almost like the gym membership. If we don't charge you, you won't show up. And we know that's true about you. So we do ask for a fee. If you need a scholarship, please just let us know. Um, the five groups this quarter, this 10-week quarter, is the factors method run by Jason Fletcher here at RevThink. And the factors method is if like a financial oversight cash flow production method that many studios that we've worked with over the years are running. It's a very simple system. There's ways of kind of managing your overall look and of your finances through your production process. And it's kind of game changing for many people. So Jason's going to take the next 10 weeks and talk through the factors method with us, show you how to put that in place and teach it to you. Um, Joe Valentine, one of our advisors, is going to have an accountability circle. Joe focuses a lot on sales. He wants to have an open forum, people asking questions about sales and sales growth. Matt Taylor, if you know him, he loves to kind of focus on expertise and selling, expertise, positioning, and so on. So his group's going to do that same thing for us this quarter. And then Nico is a small business owner out of New York City. Becoming who you already are is his theme. And then, of course, mine is the four conversations. So this is on our website. You can go to revthink.com/confab to take a look at that. Those are the small groups kind of kicking off. We also have a workshop next week called AQ. We're pushing people towards this idea of aesthetic intelligence and understanding how to explain who you are, what you do, in ways that kind of paint a bigger picture of understanding of the services you offer and still differentiating yourself from the other competitors, but not just having a blanket positioning statement that many of us just memorize and then spit out there and it feels meaningless. We want to give you the ability to understand your aesthetic intelligence. So we're going to do a webinar next week called AQ, and Matt's going to jump into his process for that. So that's just the homework. That's just a warm up as people were coming in. But let's kick these things off for real. I want to spotlight you, Blair. I'll spotlight me so you and I can have the start of a conversation. And then, of course, as always, use the chat to ask us questions. Raise your hand if you have something you want to chime in with, and we'll just have a fun, open conversation about this amazing book. But first of all, Blair, welcome. Thanks for being part of this today.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm
Yeah,
happy to be here, Tim.
yeah, I appreciate you. You're kind of like an easy target for me to grab and pull into this thing because one, you kind of know the details, the ins and outs of what it's really like to be a studio owner or an agency owner, but also this complicated idea of what sales is and where we get hung up so often. So, the insights that you have kind of just at least give us some comfort that someone understands us. So I think I want to say on behalf of everyone, we appreciate that you're out there making this content so we can feel like we belong.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my goal for you to feel like I'm spying on you.
Okay, so we already know you from Win Without Pitching, right? We got this hardcore sales guy that kind of kicks our ass. And the Two Bobs podcasts, if we're not already feeling convicted, you and David C. Baker do an amazing job of just on a bi-weekly basis, really kicking our butts and kind of keeping us in a line. Um, but the four conversations to me is like coming from a very different approach. I feel like you went on a listening tour and you started hearing a pattern and you're kind of delivering that pattern to us in this book.
Yeah, okay. That's I'm glad it feels that way. Yeah, what what it really is. What really
Yeah,
happened.
tell me.
Um, it's basically our model. It's our model off of which we hang everything that we teach. So if you think of the Win Without Pitching Manifesto, that's a principled book. I think of it as the Yes You Can book. You read it in a couple of hours, you put it down, and you're inspired to pursue a new way of doing business. But there's not a lot of here's how to in it. Um, so I thought for quite a while about whether or not I wanted to publish this book because it's basically our training program in a book.
Mm.
Um, and there are lots of training companies and other advisors who put their model out there and they've grappled with the same question, is it going to cannibalize training? And the reality is it does a little bit, but probably at the end of the day, it just grows the audience. So my thinking about it was, well, let's just take, I want to say everything I know, but that's that's not true. But let's just take everything we would teach in 12 hours of training and get all those principles and frameworks out there. And now, I mean, selfishly, what that allows us to do is training is less about onboarding information now, and it's more about just practicing what's in the book.
So is the concept of just conversational based sales, right? It that set like again, like it sounds like you're listening to us, but it sounds like the first thing you're having us address is the idea of it's just a conversation. You don't change who you are and shouldn't change who you are in personality when doing sales than when you're talking about anything else that you love or things you want to do. Just have a conversation, make it feel natural, and reveal your expertise.
Yeah, I mean, everybody in this room is a good communicator. And most of you are probably great communicators and you're probably great in a conversation. But there's something about sales where the context of a sales conversation where we we lose our ability to converse. We cease to become brilliant conversationalists. And some of us have been trained to sell this way that kind of builds this brief and present dynamics where one party is the predator and the other is the prey. And some of us have just inferred that that's the way sales works from being on the buying side of some pretty horrible
Right.
selling experiences. And then it might just be as simple as there's a lot of money at stake, so we feel a lot of pressure, and then something we do kind of rotely and without thinking too much about it suddenly becomes difficult.
I've done that exercise before. You probably have too, where you just ask a group of people, define what makes a salesperson. And then what often comes are adjectives that sound like,
Rejection proof.
yeah, used car salesman, pushy, aggressive. Those are the adjectives you're given.
Yeah.
And then you ask, the follow-up question is the last time you did were successfully sold something, what attributes did you use? And then none of those original lists show up on the second list. And then you're thinking, well, why do we have this concept that sales is the first list when you obviously have different attributes when you sell it? But there's just something that we say we hate sales or we think we have to, maybe we're more desperate because it's our paycheck. So we click into a different mode. But there's something that makes us almost differently human than we are if it's just in conversation mode and talking to somebody.
Yeah, I often say if there's just one thing I could do for you on to make you a better salesperson, it would be to reach into you and pull out everything you think you know about selling. And if you didn't have any idea on what it meant to sell, and you just showed up and had a conversation, you'd probably be further ahead. And I'm not the first person to identify that selling should be viewed through the lens of a conversation. What is specific to this model is this idea that we see it as a set of four linear and discrete conversations.
Yeah, let me share this with people. So the book, the table of contents kind of gives the book away of what you're doing differently than what I'd say like exactly how to sell or these other kind of sales books that I have. In that you really do have a very clear structure. There are four conversations, and then you're helping us navigate the objective, the principle, the framework, and the summary for each of those four conversations. And it truly, like I found the table of contents just interesting in and of itself that you are methodically showing us something and giving us a very clear method to get there. And then specifically, like the navigation tools, where we could ask, which conversation are we in? Where are we in that conversation? And where should this conversation go? Oh my gosh, it's now almost like freedom. I feel like I can navigate the wild with a compass because you've taught me how to like figure out where I am, where I want to go, and then give me just the pace I need to get to that into that one conversation and not the entire cell.
I like that metaphor of being in the wild with the compass. Um, so as you pointed out, four conversations, each conversation has its own objective, and then you've got a framework for navigating to the objective. But the framework isn't, it's not a script. The frameworks are frameworks of you typically of the questions that you would ask. And you referenced Phil Jones's book, Exactly What to Say.
Yeah.
So I think you can take all salespeople or people who have to sell, and you can put them on the spectrum of what's known as autonomy. So high creative people tend to be high autonomy. They don't like systems and routine. Um, they like to reserve the right to make it up as they go along. And then I'll generalize, but engineers, accountants are low autonomy or tend to be more low autonomy. So they're systematic, process oriented. They want visibility into the future. Creative people who have high autonomy, they're very comfortable with not knowing what's going to happen next. They love being on a stage or at the front of the room, dealing with objections and having to think on their feet. And so high autonomy people want to navigate through the sale intuitively. Low autonomy people want to know exactly what to say. That's why that's a best-selling book. And I
Right.
don't think either of those people should get exactly what they want. In the middle, you have this idea of framework. So scripts, the people who want to know exactly what to say, they want a script.
Yes.
Anybody who wants a sales script should never get one.
Because the pursuit of it is the journey in a way. Like,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I guess if you are selling high volume, low price transactional goods or transactional services where you can model out the language, you can model out exactly what to say in certain situations, that's a certain type of salesperson
Yeah.
where scripts are appropriate. But frameworks are basically it's the you have the objective, you know where you're going. You have the compass, or the metaphor I use is you have the map, but we're not prescribing a route to you. You get to choose how to get there. You can take your exact path. You just have tools to help you get to a destination that's been identified.
Yeah. And so then you get autonomy with structure. Like that's the idea. Is like now you can be free flowing, understanding, and then, but you don't have to just always feel like you're drowning or have no way of understanding which way is north. You actually
Yeah.
can navigate through the process.
There's a guy 20 years ago, a few years after I'd started Win Without Pitching. His name was Tony Mikas. Some of you might remember the name. He used to run an agency network called Second Wind. He died years ago. He said to me, he invited me out to Chicago to meet with him. And he said, I hear you're an expert in new business. You know what to say after hello. And I thought, A, that's funny. B, that is deeply profound.
Right.
That is like, so this is the answer to the question, what do you say after hello?
Yeah. Yeah. I have my third son, his name is Seamus. And when you grow up in America and your name is Seamus, most people have no idea what you're saying to them. So it's almost like a script that he runs through where like, what's your name? What's your name? How do you spell it? What does it mean? So as a young kid, we would be in a crowd of people. We would lose Seamus somewhere, but then we'd see a bunch of adults just laughing in a corner, and we're like, that's where Seamus is. And we have a feeling that he's a people person because he knew the first five things to say in any conversation. It was a script that he would run through all the time. To some degree, you're giving the similar confidence to people in the sales process of like, listen, you actually do know where to go or what to say once you get in the room. Now go open up the doors and go in the rooms. Don't be afraid. Don't feel like you're going to get stuck, and don't feel like you're going to be taken off guard.
Yeah. But if you want to kick off an interesting conversation with some new people, you probably want to start with questions, not statements, right?
For
Although the
sure.
young kid is probably starting leading with his five favorite jokes. But in a sale, um, our frameworks are largely frameworks of the questions that you need answered. So go ahead and ask the questions. And that in itself is counterintuitive to people who sell
Mm,
creative services, and people who sell in general. They feel like we have this idea that we think salespeople have to be, or when we are in sales mode, we have to be brilliant. We have to get everything right. We have to have the right answer to every question. And that causes us to plaster the fake smile on our face and nod yes when we're thinking no, and to say, uh-huh, we can do that even before the client is finished saying what they're saying. We don't listen. So seeing the sale is a series of four conversations, you know, um, and using the frameworks gets you into questioning mode and out of statement mode. And if you think of the all of the work that's done in the sale, it's about the things that you want to communicate to the client, what you say in the pitch, what goes into the deck, etc. We don't have any of that stuff in this model. It's a person showing up, facilitating a conversation.
yeah. Okay, so school us. Let's start. Start teaching us what these conversations are and how they work. You say
Okay,
in the book that they're not necessarily in this order, but you put them in a certain order. The first conversation is uh,
the probative
yeah,
conversation.
so the probative
So
one.
can
Where
I
does
back
that
up
take
and
us?
just set some
Yeah,
context for the
yeah,
four
please do.
conversations?
Yeah.
So this is a model, and I opened the book with a quote from a guy who's famous for only this quote. All models are wrong, some are useful. So a model is a view of the world, it's a way of organizing complexity. So our model views the sale as a series of four linear and discrete self-contained conversations. The reality isn't like that. It's probably rarely like that, but still, it can be helpful for you to think of it this way. So I'm not trying to make the point that the sale happens in four conversations. And I'm not even trying to make the point that you should necessarily break up these conversations. Some of them are blended together. The first one, the probative conversation, sometimes doesn't happen at all. The lines are blurry. You might need two different discussion periods or conversations to have one conversation. So it's reality is messy, and still the model can be useful. It can be useful for you to think of it as four different conversations.
Great.
So the conversations, the probative conversation. This is the first one. It's the most different from all of the others because it happens without you present. The objective of the probative conversation is to move in the mind of the client from a vendor where you have very little power in the buy sell relationship, usually because you're seen as having numerous direct substitutes or alternatives.
Right.
So you move from a vendor to the expert. That's the objective of the probative conversation. It happens without you present through your agents, typically of thought leadership and referrers. So it's
So,
it's a construct. This conversation is a construct of the idea of the reputation that you build in the marketplace.
so in a way, a common way of thinking of it is the work that we're doing in marketing is the first conversation taking place. And therefore, when you actually meet the person face to face and dialogue begins, a conversation with dialogue, some of the what needs to be used or pulled from or extracted, you've already planted seeds for that in that person's mind because they found you, they reached
Yeah.
out to you. So there's something that they've already predetermined before they actually begin talking to you. And that's the probative first
Yeah.
step.
You move from vendor to expert. Ideally, you drive an inbound inquiry with you positioned as the expert. So you take this idea that we set up in the probative conversation. It's a generalization. This idea that you are, if you're not seen as the expert, then you are seen as a vendor. So in reality, those are probably endpoints on a spectrum. But here too, it can be helpful to think of it as, if I'm in absolute terms, I'm either the expert and I have some power in this relationship, or I'm a vendor and I'm relatively powerless.
Hmm.
And we carry that idea forward throughout the arc of the sale. So in the probative conversation, and you mentioned marketing, it's a function of your strategy, your positioning, and your marketing. All of the hard work that you do on those three dimensions over hard work or difficult decisions that you make over time. And the goal is to drive inbound inquiries with that objective having already been reached. Now, we have a name for the objective. We call it the flip.
Okay.
So,
Meaning flipping someone's perception of you. Is that what the flip would
yes,
be? So can
yeah.
I do that live? Like if someone had a vendor perspective of me, they only called me for the low price offer. Can I flip them as the expert in that early conversation?
You almost certainly have done this and probably done it multiple times, and probably everybody on this call, all but the most senior people, would have would have done it as well. And
How's that?
um, so think of a conversation you had with somebody, whether it was a face-to-face meeting, but we used to have face-to-face meetings, children, back
Imagine
in the day,
that.
or a web meeting. But think of a face-to-face meeting. You walk in, let's say there's multiple decision makers on the client side, and you can tell right away from the body language that it's like, oh, there's a little power play dynamics going on. They're kind of talking to each other. Yeah, have a seat. We'll be right with you, Tim. Yeah,
Mm,
had a great weekend, went sailing, blah, blah, blah. And then they turn to you. Okay, glad you're here. We're looking to hire somebody like you, blah, blah, blah. It's pretty clear from their body language, their actual language, that they see themselves as the prize to be won here. And you're just lucky to have a seat to be auditioning for them,
yeah. Yeah.
right? And sometimes their body language is closed. If they have a note taking device, it's closed. They're explaining to you how this is going to work.
Mm,
The conversation goes on. At some point, you say something. You either make an observation or you ask an intelligent question. And in that moment, everything changes. It flips. And you recognize it. And now that you have a name for it, you'll go, ah, the flip just happened. And the
yeah.
first sign, if there's more than one of them, is the look.
Yeah. Right.
This one is different.
Yeah.
And then their body language opens up. They lean forward. Their note-taking device opens up, and they start asking you, mining you for your expertise.
Yeah. That's a
Now
good
you are the prize to be won.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we're looking for that to happen. You asked, does it happen in real life? Yeah. We're looking for it to happen before that moment. So when they reach out to you, that's already happened. That's the goal of the probative conversation.
So if I follow the structure of the book, then what's the if I that's the objective, right?
Yeah.
Some of the principles you kind of make. What's the framework? How does framework fit into that as a
Yeah. So
navigation structure here?
for for this conversation, it's a set of frameworks, and they're the frameworks for how you position your firm and how you go about marketing your firm.
Nice. Great.
So we talk about the ladder of lead generation as a marketing framework, or not just marketing, but a lead generation framework. And I don't know that we want to get into the weeds on it, but basically there are high status activities that would engender the flip, and there are low status activities that are um, more urgent. So you do want a mix of these um, high status, low urgency, high urgency, low status tactics, but you do want to climb the ladder of lead generation over time so
Yeah.
that as time goes by, you're driving more and more inbound inquiries with you already seen as the expert.
So that probative conversation is the one that most people listen to your podcast for. They're like, I know I need to do this. And then they're asking themselves this question, but how? I know I need to. They tell me all the time I need to position as an expert. How do I actually do it? You're kind of giving us the framework now to say, here are the structural things you need in place. These are the goals, objectives that you're trying to accomplish during that. But there's also constant maintenance as well. The market changes, technology changes, service change. You have to keep up with that. And that's where I think a lot of people want to do one and done, and they almost hate the idea of to maintain this ongoing probative conversation.
Yeah.
All
Sorry,
right.
there are no hacks in this book.
Sorry. Yeah. And there's no one and done. No matter who you are, there's no one
No.
and done. All right. So the qualifying conversation, that's the second one. I think most of us know this one, but again, I have, when I consult people, most people just don't really trust the qualifiers. They still want to compromise and compromise and compromise, even though they know that the project is not qualified, the person's not qualified, they're not qualified, whatever that deal is. So tell us about the qualifying conversation, what the objectives and principles are.
It's the vetting conversation. So the objective is to vet the lead to see if an opportunity exists and determine the next steps. Now, so you're basically in a qualifying conversation. Your tone is one of discernment. You're in vetting mode. It's like you have a list of questions that you want answered, and the answers to these questions will help you determine whether or not you should waste time on this opportunity, whether or not you should invest time on this opportunity. And if it's a good fit for you, then you get to decide what's a good fit. If it's a good fit for you, then you qualify in and you move to the next conversation where your tone changes from discernment to one of deep interest. The common mistake in the creative world is a tone of deep interest to somebody who's not qualified, sending all the signals, giving all your power away. And also, I wrote a post recently called, and David and I did a podcast episode on it. It's called "There There Is No Credentials Meeting." So we think if I were to ask the people on this call here to kind of model out the conversations or the meetings that happen, most of you would have a credentials meeting up front. What's happening in a credentials meeting? A credentials meeting is where you are trying to qualify for the client.
Yeah.
Now, if the probative conversation has happened, then you're already largely qualified. Now, regardless, our framework is for how you qualify the client. There is the second half of, so let's say I'm trying to sell to you, Tim, and you reach out to me and say, "Hey, Blair, I want to talk to you about whatever it is I do. I've read your books, I listen to your podcast. So I know you've already told me you've been absorbing my material. I can assume the flip has taken place. Now you reach out. We go into a qualifying conversation. I have my list of questions I need to ask you to determine if this makes sense for me. And at the end of that, I might say, Tim, I think on the surface here, this looks like a pretty good fit. Before we go to the next step, there's some other questions I want to ask you. Um, is there anything you need to know about me
Mm,
that you don't already know? So now I acknowledge to you that, well, you also need to qualify me. What you won't find in this book is a framework for qualifying for the clients. And the
right.
default is, Tim, you're going to start asking me questions, and I'm going to say, well, I have a deck. I have a 60-page keynote presentation. Let me walk you through it.
Yeah.
But I don't have a deck. I'll ask you, and you'll have some questions, even though you feel like you know me, you've been listening to me, you'll have some questions. And most of your questions will be around like, well, how is this going to work? If I hire you, how are we going to work together? And then obviously price, but I've asked you some budget questions already.
Yeah.
So we've already covered that. But most of your questions are going to be around how is this going to work and how do I know it's going to work?
Right. Yeah. Well, what I love is number one, that you get rid of that whole concept of the capabilities presentation being all about the pretty pixels that you've made out there, all these case studies you've done, almost begging for the next job, begging and begging and begging. And we do have to call out that the marketplace that we're in, it's almost trained for that. Like you're supposed to do this, they're supposed to do that, and everyone's just following a role. And you're really just saying that doesn't make any sense. Like what makes more sense is you're clearly already in the room. So they already have qualified you, can you just enter the room and start discussing what the project is, how you would accomplish it, and determine if you're right and the client is right for you and at this time. The the hardest part as an entrepreneur is to walk away from real money because it that always feels like the most desperate thing. So we disqualify ourselves soon. We lower ourselves to vendor from expert, right? And then we find that challenge of the probative conversation that you might have already accomplished. We destroy it in the next conversation we're having by flipping the script and trying to um, prove ourselves to be adequate.
I'm glad you brought that up because what I didn't point out is there's a secondary objective of the qualifying conversation. So it's to vet the lead is the short version of the primary objective. The secondary objective is while maintaining the expert position. So, and that is also the secondary objective of the third and the fourth conversations. So you work so hard to obtain the high ground of the expert through the probative conversation. You want to make sure that while you're qualifying or you're having a value conversation or you're closing, you're you're not giving up the high ground. Implied in that is the idea that if the flip hasn't happened, if there was no probative conversation, and you began the qualifying conversation as just another vendor, then you're looking for the flip to happen in
Right.
addition in the qualifying conversation. And how do you do that? I said it's a model of frameworks. It's a model of frameworks and principles, and the principles are the ideas that you embody as you use the framework to navigate to a conversation's objective.
So if I'm in a qualifying conversation, or I think I am, and it's clear to me that the person asking me questions is wants me to prove to them something, and I would say, oh, wait a second, we've missed a step, the probative conversation. And because I have this framework now, I can put on the brakes, do a pivot, go have the probative conversation, prove I'm an expert, and then jump back to now let me ask you why your project works with what we do. And
Yeah,
just
I
knows
think
how to get.
I don't think of it as going and having the probative conversation, but that is basically right. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not appropriately qualified in the client's eyes. So I would say to you, let's say I'm in the salesperson role and you say, well, I don't know if you're the right person, Blair. I'm actually talking to a couple of others. I'm not, and you say to me, you tell me why should we hire you? I really don't like answering that question directly, so I will refuse to answer it. I will say, well, it's not my job to talk you into hiring me. So you have to decide for yourself why you would hire me instead of somebody else. But let me tell you, what my clients say, why they hire me instead of somebody else, and you can decide for yourself if those reasons are or your reasons too.
I love it. I love it. Just kind of not avoid, but put the conversation in its right place, giving
Hmm.
the power to each player, and then staying where you are with confidence of like, listen, I know what I do. The marketplace knows what I do. If you don't yet know that, you can do some homework, or I can send you some homework to do. Um, but the reason we're having dialogue in a qualifying conversation is to determine what your issue is and to explain to you how I would address that issue as the expert. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's lots of information you do need to communicate to the client, but that's what your website's for, part of it. I think so in this case, when you say, yeah, well, tell me more about like how this would work, that's the one place where I think it's appropriate to show something. So I have a keynote deck and I've got it's just I call it like WIP work in process. I've got like all kinds of slides that I use for various purposes. So I might say, well, let me walk you through a model of how we work with all of our clients. Do you mind if I share a slide with you? So I ask your permission. I don't go into presentation mode. I ask your permission. I pull up the deck and I keep it in the presenter view. So I don't go into presentation mode, right? So they can see the slides on the side and I go find the right one. And I'm doing this to keep myself from going into presentation mode.
Mm.
And I click on the right one from the slide sorter. I don't go into full presentation mode and I walk them through the steps of the model. So we've got this model, it's 4 conversations, et cetera. And if we're going to work together, it starts here. And so at a business like you guys on this call, you would have these phases of the engagement that are roughly diagnose, prescribe, apply, reapply. And you would walk through the model of how you work. And then you might show case studies
Yeah.
of other clients that you've worked with, similar to the prospect you're talking to. And hopefully, your case studies are framed by your model so they can see that you actually follow this model. So there's a lot of reason why this is important, but that's what I would have you show in that second half of the qualifying conversation, what you might think of as a credentials meeting.
I love it.
But if they say, how long have you been in business? How how many people in the team? You don't need slides for that. Just answer the question.
Yeah. It's just, in a way, that's just small talk. Feel free
Yeah.
to share that, express something, have throw back something in that small talk conversation so it keeps it in the right place and doesn't snap into, oh shoot, they're asking me a really important question. Do I lie to them? Do I sneak in a couple extra people and a couple of not quite finished projects? There's no reason to do that in the conversation. All right, here's the real one, Blair, because this is the one is so challenging. The value conversation.
Yeah.
How do I actually know my value? Because I'm really, really want that job, and I would take half the price right now if I can just get it.
Yeah. Well, you get the client to tell you what your value is. It's
Yeah,
not even your value. We think about this wrong. So the objective of the value conversation, this is now the third conversation. It's the second person-to-person conversation. Whether we've had a probative conversation or not, we've had a qualifying conversation. We've decided it's a good fit. We've said it's a good fit. We've moved right into the value conversation, or we've set up another meeting, maybe with a missing senior decision maker.
thank you.
And now we're trying to get to a pricing discussion, and we want to do that based on the value to be created. And we want to have this value conversation where we arrive at initial pricing guidance, like really rough guidance, really big range, based on the value to be created rather than the cost of our solutions. So to do that, we need to actually let go of our ideas of what solutions might be. It's a four-step framework. We won't get into it, but unless you want to, but none of the steps are about what you might do for the client. It's basically, what do you want? What will we measure to prove that you've achieved what you want? What's the value of hitting these metrics and getting what you want? Now you've got numbers. Okay, if I could help you create this value, hit these metrics, get what you want, would you pay us X? Would you pay us really big number? Choke, visible reaction from the client. No, how about half that number? Right. So there's some nuance here, but it's basically, let's say you're the client again, and I determine that whatever it is that you want done, the desired future state that you have, if you get there, we hit these metrics, you're going to create, let's say it's $1 million a year in net new profit. And I say to you, well, if I could do that, if I could help you do that, Tim, would you pay us a $500,000? And you might say, I I have $50,000 budgeted.
Yeah, right. I'm a junior decision maker and I have 50,000
No,
or
and I would say,
yeah.
great. Yeah, okay. I heard you on that, and I will, when we get to the proposal, I will show you what we can do for 50,000. But back to my question, if we could help you create this value, $500,000, a million a year, would you pay us $500,000? I don't think I would. It's not a good return. 2-to-1 return in perpetuity. It's a lot of money for what you're talking about doing. Well, we haven't really talked about what I would do, and I'm trying not to talk about what about 250? If I could do this for 250, and you say, well, what would you do for 250?
Right.
And my answer is, I don't know. I haven't thought about the solution yet. You might even say, and I like to model this, you got to know it's killing me because part of me just wants to jump ahead to solutions, but I'm following this framework. I'm just trying to stay focused on what you want, the metrics of success, the value that we can create together. And I want to reserve the right to think creatively and expansively about the different ways that we could help you create this value. So back to my question, if we could help you create $1 million in net new recurring profit, would you pay us 250,000? I might pay you 100. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I have a range. I started at 500. You walk me down to 100 at the high end, and you have a budget of 50. I can
Nice.
work with that.
I can work with that. Because now I'll go find the solution that matches the opportunity that you're giving me, opposed to pushing
Yeah.
a solution regardless of what the value is, the net value is to someone.
Yeah.
By the
And
way,
so
10 to 1, I would do a 10 to 1. I wouldn't do 50%, by the way.
it depends on, yeah. And it, whatever example I use,
Yeah,
50% of the first years,
that's a lot. I'd give you
everybody,
10% of my first year. I don't it'd be
yeah.
too much. Yeah.
So Weiss wrote a book called, I think it's called Value-Based Fees years ago. And he's asked, how do you arrive at the number? What's the percentage of total value that you use? And his answer is there is no right answer, but everybody keeps asking and nobody's happy with there is no right answer. And he says, so if you're going to pin me down, the answer is 20% of the economic value to be created. Start from there and then adjust up or down. Like McKinsey, if McKinsey's proposing to come in and create cost value through cost reductions, will save you 5 million a year.
Yeah.
Their model's pretty straightforward. It's $2.5 million.
So they take
It's
half of what the savings is.
half of the first year's savings.
Yeah. And then they charge a second time because you screwed up all their entire economics and operations, and they charge you a second 2.5 million to fix it back to what it should have been to begin with. Yeah, yeah. No, to me, I think a lot of us in that value conversation, the difficulty is that we feel like there's a marketplace value for services. It's already established. The decisions have been delegated down to somebody who's just vetting vendors.
Yeah.
And that value conversation is happening in another part of the room, right? In another room at a different time. The important part is to recognize that there was a value conversation that happened somewhere. And for you in your career, with your business, in relationships, is to navigate closer and closer to be in that room so you understand that where that value is and what services or opportunities or creation that you make that could apply to increasing that value. Um, Often it plays itself out as continual, like retained work. That was so successful. Let's do it again and again and again. And you can look at it a customer lifetime value as something closer to that value proposition. But the first conversation, right, is as much as we would love to, that probative work would have to be really amazing to, in the very first conversation, be able to have a navigate the one that you're talking about. Unless you're telling me I'm wrong, like,
Nope.
well,
It's yeah, when you're a studio, if you're selling, like depending on who you're selling to, you might be like, let me restate this. Um, Executives love to have value conversations
yes.
because executives are the only ones in the organization who are charged with value creation. So a friend of mine said to me years ago, employees are worried about the past, managers are focused on the present, bringing projects in on time and on budget, and it is only executives who are focused about onto the future. And the future that they're focused on is value creation.
Hmm.
So they love value conversations. And you, if you want to separate yourself from your competitors, just learn to have a value conversation with your clients.
Okay, so in 6 weeks, I'm going to invite you into my small group on that 6 week when I start this value conversation, because I know I'm going to need you to back me up again on how to do this. It's just so challenging to get there. So
It's
I'll
a
text
simple
you when it's
four-step
coming up.
framework and
Like,
it's
join us for
hard.
an
Yeah.
hour. Come on, kick our butt again.
Yeah. It's there. So the biggest reason it's hard. So forget about, let's just set aside for a second of getting to the senior decision makers. So you have to be able to do that if you want to have a really fruitful value conversation. But the biggest reason it's hard is it's the most unlearning you have to do in this moment. So what gets you to the table that allows you to have any of these conversations, but in this case, a value conversation, is your subject matter expertise. And what gets in the way of having a meaningful value conversation is your subject matter expertise. So you'll go through the first step, uncovering the client's desired future state. What do you want, Tim? What do you want and there's some nuance around how you ask, and it's in the book, and I'm sure you guys will get into it. Um, you paint this picture of your desired future state, and as soon as you start talking, being a subject matter expert, I spot the patterns. And I say to myself, oh, I know what your problem is. I've seen this before. I know what your problem is. I know what the solution is. I know what we need to charge to do that around here because this is the way we do things around here. And
Right.
you quit listening. And the key to the value conversation is you get through the four steps. And the fourth step is set pricing guidance without talking about or thinking deeply about solutions. Now, the client has already come to you with solutions in the qualifying conversation. You're asking, like, what do you want? And the client is saying, well, we need to hire you to do this thing. We're self-diagnosed, self-prescribed, and even highly specified. Here are the specs. We just need a price on this. And you look at that, go, great. Put it
Yeah.
aside, and you keep going, and you keep using your frameworks. And in the value conversation, you've heard the client, what they want, even what their budget is, and you put it aside, and you have this four-step conversation. And you heard me model some language around, I want to reserve the right to think creatively and expansively about what's the most we could do to help these people create this value. You came to me looking for X, and we'll give you a price on X. In exchange for that, I want you to let me and my team think big. And I want your permission for me to come back and push you to think bigger.
Mm,
And it'll be okay because at the end of the day, if you don't like the big thing that we're proposing to do, and I have no idea what that is right now, you will have a price on the thing you asked for. So I'm positioning this as a trade.
I love it. I love it. And you're begging for more dialogue than accepting an orders given, a short
Yeah.
order position. Can you just accomplish this? Here's the date, time, and money. I need it. Come back to me when you're done. Like, no, you're not going to, in the long run, these conversations are going to help you mature so much more as a business, but also in your positioning, who you are, and qualify bigger and better clients as you go along. All right. So the last conversation, I'm so glad you have this one in here because it's the most important one. And I feel like most people make the mistake of trying to do this one first. They're always worrying about the close. So they have the close conversation way too early. And we have to kind of get the closing done at the closing. So tell us about the closing conversation.
So the objective of the closing conversation is to help the client to select and commit to a path forward while maintaining the expert position, right? That secondary objective. So help the client select and commit to a path forward. Implied in that is that they are going to have a choice. Now, you've already heard me model this in the value conversation. Yeah, I'll show you what we can do for that price. I know I've heard you. I've heard what you want. I've heard what price, what budget you have. I'll show you what we can do. In exchange, I want to also push you to think bigger. And then I'll have something in the middle. So I wrote about this in Pricing Creativity. If you're not already using three option proposals, like just forget everything else we've talked to. It's the lowest hanging fruit on the revenue and profit tree. Just
Yeah.
three option proposals. So that's the idea. You go back to the team, you have the debrief on the value conversation, you have the client specs on the specific thing that they want, and you start brainstorming. You say, okay, 100 grand. What can we do profitably for 100 grand? They were asking for X, but don't be limited by X. Feel free to transcend the solution. Here's what they want. Here's what we'll measure to prove what they've achieved, what they want, that they've achieved it. And here's the value that'll be created. So what's the most we could do? Let's think creatively. That's a fun exercise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, all right, what can we do for 50? Now give me something in between.
Yeah. And here, I want people to know for sure this actually happens this way. Like I work with clients and this is the way it really works. And it feels like a dream for some people. Like there's no way people are doing this, but quite literally, this is how it plays itself out. The opportunities are there, and the agencies I work with that are getting, $3 million for 6 months worth of work with a $3 million extension for the next 6 months, if it's going well, that value proposition to continually closing, knowing the next proposition close, it really is a possibility. And that's the growth cycle most of us can get into if we can get into that right framework and navigate our own thinking to follow that framework. Um, okay, so the let's just say like the overall picture we're kind of painting here, Blair, is that we often jump into the thought or process of sales, skipping ahead or just accepting, whatever services someone's willing to pay us for. We haven't really challenged ourselves to know where we might fit, or navigate into enough dialogue to get what the qualifying elements might be for a project, the value proposition that you or the value you provide to a client to create a bit more value proposition, and then lastly close the deal, or in a way like keep on closing, know the next piece and close and close and close and close and close so you can keep your business going. Um, that's the overall structure that many of us are trying to figure out. If you can give us like the one thing you want us to learn from this book when we walk away. So after we buy the book and we do your Amazon review, what do you want us to write in that Amazon review that Blair taught us?
It was much better than Cats. I'm going to read it again and again. Some of you will get that joke.
I love it.
Um, yeah, what's the one thing I think we've hit on the key points. It's a conversation, it's a series of conversations. It's not your job to talk people into hiring you in those conversations. It's focus on the objective of the specific conversation and use the frameworks, embody the principles, and then let the chips fall where they may. One of the things that we didn't talk to explicitly, but it's implied in all of this, is this model should lower your cost of sale. Lowering your cost of sale in terms of time, money, and emotions will make you a higher performing salesperson. So I'm fond of saying if you want to get better at selling, 3 words: no sunk costs. And time, money, and emotions. Emotions are the big one, right? But the more time you invest in trying to get the deal, um, the more bought in you are, the harder it is for you to push back on a flawed selection process or say no. I just finished an hour of going deep into a narrow principle on this with a bunch of my clients. And somebody who's about 60 made the observation. He said, one of the biggest things that this approach has done for me is just like I see the patterns and I realize, oh, this sale is going the wrong way or for whatever reason. And he said, I just push back right away. Just like um it's a at some point you need a little bit of a few years of experience under your belt. At some point you spot the patterns and go, okay, this is where things go bad. This isn't a good fit here. I would like you in that moment to speak up. One of the principles in the book is to say what you're thinking. We think in a sale we have to be
Right.
smiling yes even when the answer is no. You should be more discerning. If you think the client is making a mistake in terms of their diagnosis or their prescription, you should see yourself as having a professional obligation to point out that you think they're making a mistake, or at least to challenge them.
Yeah, I love that. And you guys practice what you preach. I've read your posts and know that you've put your own kind of case studies or scenarios, and sometimes kind of funny, of how when people reach out to you, ask you to qualify for your work, you and David will joke about it on the podcast or put something out there of like you just tell the person, no, we don't qualify ourselves. This is you should already do that, and you kind of like let it stand, um, and that level of expertise becomes very evident in that process. And you guys come across as strong leaders, people with confidence, and so on. That's the positioning you want to be in this marketplace.
I hope we come across as people who are fed up wasting their and other people's time.
Yeah, you
So
do
we'll
that as
just.
well, but that's the curmudgeonly element of you guys.
I
Elements
got an
too. It's
email
like,
once from somebody's assistant. Can you send over some credentials information for blah, blah, blah? And my reply was no. One word, no.
but is this the one
This
that
isn't going
David
to
then?
end well. I know how this is going to end. It's not with A, you hiring me, and B, me creating value.
But isn't this
No,
the one that ends where like David says, I got the same email, I forwarded it to her boss and said, you should fire this person. And he got hired for the gig by
that's
saying,
a different one. We talked
oh,
about
okay.
that. Yeah, we got the same email. I replied back and said, I'm going to need to have a conversation with your boss. And he replied back and he didn't reply. He forwarded the email to her boss and said, this person is incompetent, fire her. And he did and hired David.
Nice. That's a that is the probative conversation, the qualifying conversation at its extreme, whatever. That's pretty awesome.
Didn't laugh about somebody getting fired. She was truly incompetent, though.
Um, I want to open up the floor for some questions, but I know we're going to lose people because we originally had an hour. So I just want to tell people this will be available. This recording will be available on RevCommunity from our website. If you're not already a community member, you can just sign up right here and join the community. If you're a creative entrepreneur, we'd love to have you. As well as the confab groups we talked about is available right here on our website too. Just go to confab groups and feel free to look at the groups that we're having, the conversations, and feel free to register for them. So before we lose people, I want them to know they can watch this replay within our community. We always post that. Give us like 24 hours to kind of get it up there, but it'll be available too. All right, are you good for a little bit, 10, 15 minutes to answer some questions? I don't know what your out time is.
Uh, I am good. I'm doing another podcast in half an hour.
Okay, cool. Well, then I will make sure we give you enough break. If we can finish just at 20 till. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
13 minutes? Okay. We might not have any questions, so we might be done in 3 minutes if you want to. Feel free if you have a question, raise your hand or throw something in the chat here, and I can grab a hold of that and play out this thing. I'm sure many of us just want that last like boost of confidence that we're going to actually be successful. Um, um, let's start with Footy. Footy just asked a question. How do we react to a world that is continuing to devalue the creative work?
It's a great question. I had lunch with a client last week. He's in the video production space. And I said to him, man, you got to get out of this space. I don't mean that exactly how it sounds, but um, if you see yourself and bill yourself as or promote yourself as a service provider, you're already in deep trouble. So the reason I was counseling this person in the video production space to get out of the video production space is, well, you all know the tools are democratized, right? Everybody's got a pretty good camera. Everybody's got pretty good editing software. Some people are pretty good at editing it. AI is moving really fast, right? Are these tools in any less demand? Are they any less valuable? Nope.
Right.
It's the way you're selling them. I provide this service. If that service is law, if it's accounting, if it's engineering, that all of these things are being disrupted by AI. I know people in every one of those spaces that are working on AI solutions. I just think of how I use, you know, we don't use our lawyers nearly as much as we used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
ChatGPT is pretty good at rewriting contracts and analyzing contracts, right? So what are these businesses going to do? Law firms are going to have fewer lawyers. Engineering firms are going to have fewer engineers. And because they have the certifications, they will be stamping their authority on work that their clients are doing with LLMs, right? Maybe there's an equivalent in your business, but you don't have this, like it's not a gated profession with licensure. So then how do you think about it? How you think about it is you're not even the service, you can't be like I've been saying for years, design firms should not bill themselves as design firms. You should see design as a tool that helps you do one of three things in the design business. So if yours a design firm, you're not in the design business really. You're either in the business of marketing, helping your clients communicate to their audiences of customers, communications, helping your clients communicate to non-customer audiences, product development. You're designing some sort of product of some kind, whether it's a website, it's an app, it's a chair, whatever it is.
That's right.
And design is a tool that you help you use to do those things. So you need to think of your business. I like Aisha Armstrong wrote a book called Productize, and she has this great line about the question that you should ask yourself when it comes to positioning. What urgent and expensive problem do you help your clients solve? And then go to your toolbox. So design, video production, whatever it is, these are tools. What tools can you, if you look, go back to the problem that the client is trying to solve, assuming it's the right problem, what other tools might you add and start to blend? So now when you start to blend tools to solve specific problems, now you're getting into really interesting businesses, more niche businesses that aren't easily replicable. So you're starting to bundle tool sets into unique solutions that help clients solve specific, urgent, and expensive problems.
Yeah.
But is if you continue to see yourself as a service provider, whatever that service is, your business is being destroyed right now. And it has been slowly for years, but that's just the acceleration of that curve is just ramped right
Yeah,
up.
because to some degree, what you're saying is what you do through design is not being devalued, but what is being devalued are the deliverables, the outputs, the technical outputs that you're creating, right? So as technology advances, of course we're going to devalue the output if you can do 10 times more than you could in the same day because the render farm is stronger and everyone catches up to you. That changes it. It totally changes the value of the output. But the design aesthetic itself that creates value through communication or marketing and outreach, that's still very, very valuable.
Yeah.
So it's how you position yourself or how you see yourself in that marketplace is where the challenge is for most of us, how we actually process that. Um, yeah, that's really great, and especially in today's world, like we actually need to devalue the outputs because we need more output than ever before. The marketplace is changing, the channels are increasing, the demand is increasing. So how do we get more output from the same day? If you're judging it by how many pixels you delivered, what the resolution is of what you delivered, is that how you used to price things? You're not going to get it per pixel anymore.
Yeah.
And that's just, but who you are and what you contribute, that's still of high value and really important. Um, I want to bring in EB. EB has a question for you too. I can just, um,
Hi.
I'll add you in here as a spotlight too. Hey, EB.
Hey. Um, it's I guess kind of related to that question, but a lot of firms that we work with will they've already decided. They'll say like I'm going out, I'm looking for video production because we need our problem is that we need 5 videos. Obviously, we know that's not an actual problem. Somewhere along the line, somebody has decided that the videos matter and are maybe going to solve a problem. But that person, especially if you're working for like a Google and Amazon or whatever, that person could be in another country. Like that person is unidentifiable to you in some way. At that point, and at that point, we've said no to a lot of stuff because at that point, they are just looking for a vendor. Nobody's in a position of power to make a change. At that point, is that lead disqualified? Are you like, wow, well, I can't work with this company because
Mm.
of, or at that point, are you going, which is hard, right? I mean, in our business, sometimes we'll say like, you need a FANG, which is a Facebook, Apple, Amazon, used to be Netflix, Google, because there's like not enough without having one of them. But like at that point, are you saying, okay, lead's not qualified because they're never going to have something where I get to have that value conversation? Or is there some way to get even an organization at that level to sort of rethink what they're asking?
Great question, because a lot of us fall to that.
Mhm.
Thanks, EB.
Yeah, so you're not qualifying out the client, you're qualifying out the opportunity. And if you are indeed qualifying it out, saying like we don't work this way, you would say, listen, it's not like we're not the group you come to when you want a specific thing built. We're the group that you come to when you've got a challenge and you think video is part of the solution and you want our input into that solution. So here's think of us for these types of problems. Um, Maybe think about introducing me to some other people in the organization, higher up in the organization, so that we can have conversations about future possibilities. etc. That's how I would have you think of it.
Yeah. So
And
so navigating through multiple opportunities, but not disqualifying the client.
yeah. And I just want to touch on, I want to go back to something Jeffrey said about the continuing to devalue creative work. And it speaks, well, it speaks to what Ebby was saying too. Um, so what is creativity? I subscribe to Mahai Csikszentmihalyi's definition of creativity, which is creativity is the ability to see. It's not the ability to write or draw. Now, Jeffrey cited creative work. So if creativity is the ability to see, going back to Abby's problem or situation, you would say, listen, you may very well need these things, but that's like anybody can do this for you. Like,
Mm.
and I'm not going to get into bidding war on these tactical videos. Where we provide the greatest value is when we can help you think more creatively about the problem first, and then we can help you craft the solution. If you're set on the solution and you've got a highly specified solution, like that, you could go start a bidding war with that for that on with 100 firms, and we're not going to be one of those. But if you remember, if your boss can think, just plant the seed to think of us a little bit earlier, that's where we provide the greatest value.
Oh, that's so perfect. It's so perfect. Just moving yourself closer and closer to the heart of the matter and the decision makers that are being part of, who are establishing the job way sooner. Okay, we have 3 minutes left, so I'm gonna ask this last question from Alex. First of all, Alex gave you some accolades and just said first time listener. It sounds like you have a fan though in the first time. So Alex,
Thanks,
his podcast is called the Two Bobs podcast. And it's David C. Baker is the thing. So if you're going to be a listener, that's the best place to kind of like hear their voices regularly. Okay, the question is, have you ever delivered more value than you were able to charge for? And then what have you learned from that?
Yeah, it's great. I opened my second book on pricing creativity with the story. I'm onboarding somebody who'd been a kind of a client. He'd come to some things I'd done. He'd pay me a little bit of money over the years. I'm onboarding him into like a year-long program that I used to run, and he's saying, "Hey, I just want to thank you. You've created. I've made a lot of money from your advice." And I said, "Oh, that's nice." He said, "No, I've made a lot of money from your advice over the years." And I said, "Oh, that's great." And he said, "Blair, I need you to understand, I have personally made millions of dollars from following your advice." And in that moment, I totaled up everything that he'd paid me over the years, and it was like less than 10 grand. And I thought, my first reaction was, that isn't fair. And then I thought, well, that's stupid. You know, so there are a lot of competing thoughts in there, but I resolved to learn more about value, and I went down a rabbit hole and wrote a book about value and pricing. So that's what I learned about it. But here's the thing that you can, to save you from going down the rabbit hole.
Hmm.
Pricing, you are never going to get pricing exactly right. If you want to get better at it, price the value, not the service. So reserve the right to charge your clients different prices for different things, even if it's the same thing you did for somebody else. You price the client, not the service. And then do an after action review after every meaningful engagement and ask yourself, all right, did we make money on it? Great. How much value, as far as we can tell, did we end up creating for the client? What was our contribution to the value? Okay, now that we have a rough order of magnitude of the value that was created, what's the lesson? If we had this to do over again, would we charge more or less? And if you decide you're going to charge more, you can use that case study as an example. In this situation, we're going to charge more next time. You can say to a client, last time we did this for somebody, we created this much value for them. So without the after action review, this is an idea from Ron Baker, without reviewing your pricing, if you're going to customize your pricing and price the client, you need to build that step in of doing an analysis afterwards. What did we learn? Should we have priced it higher or lower?
Yeah. That's a perfect example because so many times, well, I'd say like the level of maturity needed to accomplish that. Because so many times what we are working at is basically off of a budget sheet. And I like to tell people there's a budgeting is a science, pricing is an art. Like you have to look at it of like, what's the total picture you're trying to accomplish, regardless of what it costs you to get it done. There should be a lot of margin in some of those projects and small margin in others based off of the
Yeah.
strategy you're going for. Be okay with that. But if we always go to the budget and then we just add 10%, we're just fools. We simply are just commoditizing something from the very beginning. And then worse is I feel like people store up these budget and actuals, and they're always comparing how good they were at guessing how much they were going to spend at the beginning of the project. And did they make this tiny little margin at the very end? And if so, they call that success. I think like, no, 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 like you just let that budget process determine how you're going to produce the project, but determine what the project is first, how much margins is available, how much value, in your case, you're talking about value you're going to create, and then, of course, get it done, but get it done as efficiently as possible. Create your own margin in those opportunities. But it takes some maturity. I find mature firms understand that stuff. Immature firms are just used to being a freelancer, day rates, and so on. So you graduate through that process. And we want to get people as mature as quickly as possible and start breaking those rules and those bad habits as much as possible. So
We want you to get old fast, like some of us have.
all right, Blair, I'm going to text you in 4.5 weeks because I need you to come back for that value conversation in my small group. So
I look forward to that text.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
I just
guys.
say everyone is saying thank you here on the chat, but
Yeah.
I want to say personally, just thank you for taking this time, writing these books, having that thought leadership out there. What you guys do is really great. So I appreciate you guys.
Thanks,
And
Tim.
look forward to more collaboration as time goes on. So thanks.
Likewise. All right. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.
Great to see everyone. Talk to you soon.